we do have some important things that I'm going to try to cover. I'll also share with you that some of the information that we're going to talk about today is not going to make some people happy. It's going to frustrate you. I wouldn't say happy, it's going to frustrate you, because part of the main focus of this conversation today is about the Educator Effectiveness Initiative and what it is that we need to engage in. When I say we, it's me, it's the administrators, it's a lot of our technology folks in the district, and it's also you. So with that, I'm going to get started, and basically, hopefully we'll get this to work too. Now we're ready to go. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Flexible In-Service Days. I'm going to spend a good bit of time talking about Educator Effectiveness Initiative, an overview, which includes those next items: student learning objectives, student performance profiles, and then at the end we're going to wrap up with what I consider to be some very good news, some of the district initiatives that we are working on. So we're starting with what I think are some great opportunities. We're ending with some good news, and we're sandwiching it in the middle with some things that we need to address and deal with. So first, setting the stage, educator effectiveness, we've talked during the beginning of the year. We talked about this last year. We've been talking about it. It's a major PDE initiative that focuses on how you will be evaluated. As I said at the beginning of the year, one thing that will be very different moving forward is all of you, all of us, will not be evaluated the same anymore. When I say the same, not only do I mean the process is different, but I also mean that individually, the people sitting next to you may be evaluated very different from how you're evaluated. You may both be in the same building, but because you're teaching a different content area, things are going to look different. And we're going to talk about how those things are going to look different. And those things deal with student learning objectives, PVAAS rostering, teacher performance profiles, and you will find by the end of the day that for some of you it's going to mean more work this year. You also have the challenge of 180 student days and 192 staff days. As you know, we've had a number of snow days. As a result of those snow days, it's going to be a challenge for us to complete the entire school year by the 1st of July. Actually by June 20th. And our goal, our outer marker, is to put in place a way that our professional staff can be completed all of their work by June 20th. And we're really trying to have all of our students done by June 17th or earlier. And if we're able to do something with forgiveness days, we may be able to roll that all the way back to June 13th. So we're working on that. I talked about the 7 weather-related. We have some very important professional development activities we want to get into today and talk about. And also, I want to begin with talking about how I see PDE shifting responsibilities. How PDE, all of the legislation in the past probably 5 years, but I think it's been going on for more than 10, been moving a lot of responsibility from the district and the state back to our teachers and the individual. So starting with that, if you look at the little graph I have up there that has school district on my right, individual on the left, these are some of the changes that have taken place. If you look at the evaluation system, and I know there are people in the room that have been in education as long as I have, many, many years ago there was an evaluation system. It was called the PDE 333 or the Debbie 333. It was a check-off evaluation system. Principal came in maybe once a year, maybe twice. Sometimes they never came in. And at the end of the year, you had a check-off that you received. Each box was worth 20 points, 4 boxes. 80 points were satisfactory, 79 was unsatisfactory. Probably 99.995% of all teachers in the state and principals received 80 points. Since that time, things have been drastically changing. And what has happened recently is the whole evaluation process has shifted with the new legislation. What you saw this year for the first time was a school performance profile. So no longer is there a huge district component, but now there's this school component where the accountability goes down to the school level. And as you know, 15% of your evaluation is tied to your school's performance profile. If, however, you go to multiple schools, then you receive a percentage of all the schools that you attend their school performance profile. And then more importantly, moving forward to next year, the evaluation changes and puts a big part of that evaluation on your shoulders and into your classroom. And when I say on your shoulders, before it was the principal came in and looked at what was happening and then made some decisions and talked about what they believed they saw in terms of instruction and the quality of instruction related to your evaluation. Beginning next year, you have that school performance profile, but you also have an SLO that you have to produce. And on that SLO, based on the performance of you meeting that specific objective, or more than one, that will factor into your evaluation. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, what that will look like. And then for some of you, the data that's being collected today, this year, on the PSSAs and the Keystones, will factor into your evaluation 3 years from now, in the 3-year rolling average. So you can see how that has really shifted from where it was, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, to where we are today, where so much of it is not about what that person is seeing, but what you're deciding to do with the SLO, and on top of that, with the actual performance of your students. When it comes to Act 48 professional development, many years ago we put in place, of course, Act 48. All of you know what that looks like. You have to get 180 hours in so many years, and then it keeps rolling from there. And for the most part, that has been the district responsibility. The first major shift came with our principals under Act 45. Our principals no longer earn Act 48 hours. They have to earn Act 45 hours. The district has no responsibility in providing that. They are required to get those hours on their own. They do it in the evening. They do it on weekends. And occasionally we allow them. I know Mr. Kircher and Mr. Williams today are out at training. We will permit them to go to training, but it's at no cost to the district. It's all the individual responsibility for them to maintain their certification strictly sets on their individual shoulders to do the training. I see that moving at some point in time also in some ways to our professional staff. As they continue to change the rules and regulations for Act 48, I can see at some point in time where there will not be enough activities that schools can provide within the day. I don't see it this year or next year, but I would look to 5 years out as a possibility of seeing some changes. Once again, moving over. When we talk about academic performance because of the evaluation, previous years, back in a long time ago, there was TELS testing. And out of the TELS testing, you sometimes had a building score, but it was always a district score. Eventually, we moved to PSSAs. When PSSAs first became, were the measure, well, the only thing that people wanted to know was, did you make AYP? Did your building meet AYP? This year, evaluation and student performance and the accountability went to the building level. And now at the building level, your building received a score that was not only based on PSSAs and Keystones, but the growth measure. Next year, for the first time ever, there will be reports generated for some of us in this room that go to specific to the classroom level that talks about the performance of your students and your level of responsibility for instruction with those students. That's a huge change in the last 5 years on what's happening with student performance and the accountability. When we talk about data analysis, and I know some people remember when I first came into the district and I was in meetings and I was putting up data and I was talking about data and data and data, and people looked at me thinking that I was way over the top. But today, almost every one of you at some point in time during the year are digging in deeply into the data about your student performance and using that on a regular basis or a weekly basis or a marking period basis or tied around assessments on what do I need to do to help my students perform. Drastic shift in the last 10 years. And finally, when we talk about pension, this is something I will keep preaching to everyone. And I want you to think about this, how many years you have until you can retire. And I'm going to tell you this, if you are sitting in this room and you've only been in the profession with 10 years, do you believe that a defined pension system is going to be in place 25 years from today? If you're going to be retiring in 20 years, do you believe it's going to be in place? 15 years. And so one of the things that I'm going to tell you, that one of the most important things you should walk out of here with today, especially if you're new to the profession, is you should start thinking about how I'm going to manage my own pension in the future. And am I taking appropriate steps today for my financial security when I want to retire? Sometimes we hear this message, but we don't think about that, what's going to happen to us. We just keep putting it off. I even worry myself that in the next 5 or 10 years when I choose to retire, what will the pension system look like? And I don't have a lot of time to go back and rebuild that, because I've always counted on a defined pension system. So I think as my advertisement will be every time you hear me speak, if you're young, if you're new, if you're old, you need to think about, will that pension system be in place for you in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and what will that look like? So that's my take on how things are drastically shifting from what used to be a responsibility of the state and the school district back to the school, and now a lot of it is moving back to the individual. Let's talk about the flexible in-service days. Here's our goal. Number one is to replace 2 in-service days. Right now, if we were to schedule those in-service days, it will take you into the 16th and the 17th, or into the 22nd and 23rd, or 23rd and 24th, that Monday and Tuesday in June, to reach your 192-day contracted expectations. I don't think anybody really wants to be here that last week in June. However, if people need to be here, we will have activities for those individuals to engage in. Flex days are going to be implemented basically on a 2-hour increment. That's not hard and fast. We tried to lay it out that way, and the reason we looked at the 2 hours is this is not going to be easy to accomplish. We have to look functionally and realistic at what we're talking about. There are approximately 13 weeks left between now and the end of May, Memorial Day weekend. So if you divide that up, that basically means that you're going to be looking at one activity every 2 weeks to participate in. That may or may not work within your schedule. We have people who are coaching, you're taking classes, you're taking care of your parents, you're taking care of children, you're going out to teach a class. We have a lot of things that are happening in your world. So there may be people that start with this and say, you know what, I want to do this, but at the end of the day, they may only end up with 1 day. That's fine. I know that life happens. I know things that people are really engaged in a lot of different things, but we're trying to give you the opportunity to make this happen. Some of the scheduling might work out better for some of the individuals to do 1-hour increments for a couple times and maybe 2 hours. I'm okay if you do a 3-hour increment. I'm not worried about the time. I'm actually more worried about accomplishing the tasks that we need to get accomplished than I am the seat time. That's why today, whether we finish in 1 hour or we finish in 2, it's still one of those 2-hour sections along the way. But it will be a challenge when you think about 13 weeks. If you go the next 2 weeks in June, there's some more time, which it can carry on into June also. When you look at the focus, it's really, we're going to look at the SLOs, which are critical, and whether people take advantage of the SLO work time and the SLO training, they still must have their SLO, their draft submitted by the May 21st date or whatever that date might be that we talk about. But we're going to provide opportunities for SLO, some district initiative, and school initiatives. The first Flex Day is really saying we looked at what were we going to do on February 14th as an in-service day. And we took all of those activities and we basically said, let's just spread those out and make those available for flex time. As simple as that. This was supposed to be one of those activities on that day. Not talking about flex time, but talking about, I was going to talk about SLOs and the educator effectiveness challenges that we're facing. So there's 2 hours for today. Then those other 4 hours will shake out into building and district initiatives, and we'll be asking that you'll be working with your building principal. There's going to be some challenges with this because some people are going to say, well, they're doing this, don't I get to do this, or how does this work for me? And we know we're going to have to work through some of those unique issues. But this is the first cut. Was that or is that an activity that would be scheduled on one of the 3 in-service days that we've lost? Would it be something that you would have allocated for that February 15th in-service day or 14th in-service day? Would it have been for the April in-service day or for the May 20th in-service day? If it would have been one of those activities, most likely working with your building principal, it will be approved. And that's either for the district or the school initiatives. For the second flex day, replacing the April 16th, what we have set up for everybody is an online training opportunity, which you can do at any point in time that's convenient for you, which is dealing with the SLOs. And then we're going to set up several work sessions for people to work together in developing the SLOs so that we can have them turned in, a draft turned in prior to the start of school. And all of that will be managed at your building level or at your division level. When it comes to record keeping, it's going to be very simple. And you'll see the form next. There's not going to be attendance sheets that people are filling out at all the sessions. At the end of the day, there's one sheet. It has several activities listed. Your responsibility is to put your name or the date next to when you did that activity and submit it to your building principal. That is what's going to cover the flex day pieces. Very simple, not complicated whatsoever. However, we will be using My Learning Plan for those of you that are interested in Act 48 hours. And we're also using My Learning Plan to help people manage when these different things are going to be taking place. This is basically for the flex day, what that will look like in terms of submitting it. Your building principal will hand these out to you or will email them to you. It's very simple. You're just going to go from top to bottom and list, I did this, I did this, I did this. Turn it into your building principal, and that will be what we will use for the record keeping in terms of did you complete all the appropriate hours. Our goal is to make this as simple as possible, but accomplish those things that we need to complete by the end of the school year, which are the SLOs, which are a couple of building initiatives, some data work, some planning around curriculum initiatives. Get those things done. That's what our goals are. You've seen this. Now I'm going to transition into the teacher effectiveness piece. You've seen this many, many times. This is not new to any of you. You know that this year what the Act 82 of 2012, you know that pie on the other side talks about where we're going in the future between observation data, building level data, teacher-specific data, and elective data. This is what the future looks like for all of us when it comes to evaluations. This year, your evaluation is 85% what it's been for a long time. Building principal comes in, either walkthrough, differentiated supervision process, or clinical observation, and gives you an evaluation, a rating tied to planning, preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibility. The other 15% comes from your school performance profile, which you already know what your. What's interesting is that the evaluation for this year is not tied to last year's school performance profile. It's tied to what your students will earn this year and for next year, which means that the evaluation process is completely out of sync. So that what happens is the evaluation that you receive at the end of this year is only partially completed until the SPP data comes in. I do not know how we're going to make it work. I know that it was a challenge this year because those folks who got a mid-year evaluation, their mid-year evaluation was based on last year's SPP score. And to add some complications to that, any teacher that changed building got their mid-year observation based on the principal within that building that they were working now, but their SPP data came from the building that they were in last year as they factored through the process. So these are some of the little unique changes we need to become accustomed to how the system works. So your school performance profile will be based on this year's performance of our students on the PSSAs, Keystones, Growth that we're going to receive next October. I don't know what that means for those of you who are sitting here waiting for tenure. Because you're supposed to receive tenure after the 3 years as long as that last evaluation is satisfactory. So, but the 3-year mark occurs at the end of the school year. But the evaluation piece doesn't come in until October. So it's a minor glitch in the system that we're trying to understand how that will work. So, but let's talk about 2014-15, which is a whole nother animal. Because 2014-15 now will include 50% observation data. We're well aware of what that looks like. Now we know what the SPP data is, but remember that won't come in until the following October of 2015. But the new piece is that elective data, which is the SLO that you're going to need to develop. When I look at this process and what I know about you as teachers and as a group and as individuals, I really think that you will sweat and be very frustrated about writing the SLO and the wordsmithing, because many of you are going to want that to be perfect. I've sat in rooms with people watching them argue over, is that really what we mean? Is this really what we're trying to say? I believe that's going to be the easiest part. Because once you have that down, then you have to go to the next level. And the next level on your SLO is you have to determine what's your target point. And we're not sure what those target points should be. You're going to have to help us as the administrative team identify that as we go back and forth. And for an example, you may choose an assessment, or we're going to tell you to use multiple assessments, where a target performance would be 70. The expectation is that you're going to have 70% of your students achieve. I'm going to make this really complicated. 70% of your students achieve advanced on the PSSAs. Let's just say that's the example we're using. Once we determine the target, then we have to determine what is the rating for that. Knowing that everything in the evaluation is now based on a 3-point scale, 0 to 3. 0 at failing, 3 being distinguished, 1 needs improvement, and 2 satisfactory. So is that 70, is that cut point satisfactory? Or is that cut point distinguished? Because then we have to set up the bands so that we would have to say that whatever your particular SLO is, that if it's a score within this range, if you've achieved this level of that particular objective, then that's a 3. And maybe if it was 70, maybe that the 3 or distinguished is an 80. And that maybe a needs improvement is a 60. But I'm thinking as I look at this and I look at the design, I think this year we may want to set it more not as a real clean curve or bell-shaped curve, but one that's slightly skewed, that is to me, I would always look for a greater margin for a stretch, or a shallower margin for stretch, but a greater variance on the other end for what is satisfactory. Because you have to think about it when you're assessing your students and looking at your student population and what is realistic for someone to achieve. Because keep in mind, that score is going to be tied to 35% of your evaluation. And so I think that's going to be the real challenge. And because I think that's going to be the challenge, this is why we laid the process out the way we laid it out. This is what we're thinking this year. PDE requires every one of you to write an SLO. For this year, our focus is train, design, build, and review. For the 2014-15 school year, it's for your current SLOs. Our plan is that at the beginning of the year, in August, we're going to allow you an opportunity to review, adjust, and submit before they're due in September. Because what you're going to submit at the end of this year is just a draft. And it could change drastically. For example, you might be teaching geometry this year, and you show up in September and you have algebra on your schedule. So if you put in place a SLO tied to geometry, it will not make sense. So not only do we have to give consideration to the transfers, if you happen to be a first grade teacher, you have a good sense of what your students look like right now, but you know your first grade class next year could look drastically different from this year's class. Matter of fact, all of you know that no matter where you are sitting today, next year's class may have a very different profile than this year's class. So we always need that opportunity to make some adjustments to whatever that SLO will look like. So the idea is we're starting now with the draft turned in at the end of this year. And then when we come back in August, we're going to spend more time working on it with the final submission in September. But then in the first semester of next year, we want to evaluate the way that we put the SLOs together. Did it make sense? Did it work? Do we need to change it? Do we need to modify it? Because before the end of next year, not only do you have to do the evaluation of your SLOs, you have to start the construction of another SLO. So we have to start to work into what this cycle is going to look like and how does this work within our organization. So the process just keeps repeating. The link that I put up there has no value to you sitting on that screen. But when this is made available to everybody, you'll be able to go in here and click on the link. This is what PDE and what we're defining as designing, thinking, conceptualizing, organizing, discussing, and researching, what it is that your SL is going to focus on. I really think this year it's more about discussing, conceptualizing, organizing. I don't know that we have a lot of time to do some deep research this year in terms of developing the SLO. We want to build, develop, and sharing, completing, and the review is that process that's ongoing before we submit the final in September. This is what we have come to the conclusion as an administrative team that we believe is the best for this year. First and foremost is one SLO for every teacher. There are some arguments out there that you should have more than one SLO. The idea of putting all your eggs in one basket, that if that SLO goes south, what does that mean? On the other hand, I don't know if it's quite possible to construct several SLOs and be prepared to do that on the first year cycle. At the same time, there's also some complications around the development of one SLO, because if you think of it this way, if you're a fifth grade teacher and you happen to work in a building that has a parallel block scheduling strategy, you're teaching math, or you're teaching reading, you're teaching science, you're teaching writing. So it's pretty easy, maybe you're going to design everything around math, and that's your SLO. However, if you're a self-contained teacher, and you're teaching reading, writing, math, science, social studies, and everything, then you have some options to think about in terms of what area you want your SLO. And maybe after year one, you may want to do two SLOs. Now, the question that came up yesterday about this, will these replace our SMART goals? And our desire down the road is to begin to merge the two processes together. There's no desire to create more work. There's the desire to just take the work that we're doing and shift it over into what is required of PDE along the way. All of the SLOs must be tied to performance data of some sort. It must be skilled focused, and we are recommending that everybody uses multiple assessments. It should not be a one-shot, one-test, winner-take-all idea. It should be benchmarking along the way and multiple assessments to measure the type of progress that our students have made throughout the year. And then everything has to be approved by your building principal. One of my concerns in this process is to build some reliability or inter-rater reliability so that all of our building principals are looking at the SLOs through the same lens. And this is one of the reasons why we want them turned in earlier in the year. Because our plan looks like this. We're at the February timeline, and we're hoping that everybody will be able to complete the online training by the end of March, so that then we can build all of the workshops for writing. And we've laid out, we're looking at March 26th, May 20th to provide a variety of opportunities for people to get together and work on these. We want your finalized draft SLOs submitted to your building principal or your supervisor by May 21st. Because what we plan to do as a team, just like those of you that used to participate in the writing evaluations, is we're going to sit down as a team and go through all of these and talk about, you know, those that we see that are very strong, those that need some revisions, especially, but my focus is going to be more tied to not the semantics and the wordsmithing, but tied to the evaluation criteria. What are the numbers that we're selecting? Are we seeing some of the same things across the district? What type of modifications need to be made? Because what we want to do then is we want to, by that June 19th in-service day, it's one of the days that we'll be in, is to give all those back to you with some feedback and have some time for you to work on them on that particular day. And then we'll put them away till we come back in August and see how things unfold between now and that time of the year, which the SLOs are due September 26th of next year. What we have worked on and worked with Karen Zarni, and I know that some of you have already touched some of this work, the elementary level, the focus is going to be literacy and mathematics, with the exception then by content areas, our special area teachers by special areas, and professional role educational specialists. It varies a little between elementary and middle, but you'll see some similarities. For its grade level and content area, and then content areas, and then professional roles the same at the middle school, and then that pretty much replicates what the high school, but at the high school, as you know, we're a little bit different. It'll be course level, grade, content area, special educators, and then professional role. These are some of the things that, you know, just summary, you know, the goal is that you complete the online assignment by the 26th of March. That we have, there's some responses to the, you know, we want you to reflect on the SLO, and that's really to help us gauge, do you understand, you know, where's your understanding of what we're doing in this process, so that we can help people as we move forward. And then once again, everything will be published so that you can go out there and get this information. Oh, did it twice. Okay, questions on SLOs. I want to just take a deep breath because I know I'm moving really fast. But so any questions on SLOs?
Are all students that say I teach taken into account, say I might have life skills students or autistic students that may be on, say, a pass-fail? Does my SLO have to take into account 100% of my population? No.
I mean, we're trying to be very open-minded. Now, obviously, we can't let you narrow it down and say, oh, this SLO is for Curtis only. But we want you to look at something that's realistic, that's going to tie to our instruction, tied to learning, tied to where we're trying to move our students moving forward. But we also, for the first year, have to be realistic that there's issues that we're not aware of yet. There's unintended consequences. So that's why we want to give people time to work together in collaborative groups, give it to our administrators to review it, and then also take another step back over the summer, revisit it again in August to see if it makes sense based on whatever the changes might be. And then we're going to build safeguards in that allow people to make modifications during the year, because a lot of things happen during the course of the year. Nothing's pure.
Is it true that as of right now, the state actually has no way of evaluating our SLOs and their effectiveness?
The SLOs are a district responsibility to evaluate. The state has nothing to do with the SLOs. The state has everything to do with PVAAS, not the SLOs. So we own the SLOs. We choose them at the end of the day. You choose them with the administration, but we own that completely. I think the question comes in that's been asked is, does this really make a difference? And there's no research out there that says all of these changes have ever had an impact on instruction or learning.
Yeah, well, people have said that you've actually tried to ask that question.
I've asked that question. The question I got was this. I asked the people from EVAS, and the question was this. In all the things that you've done with EVAS in Tennessee, TVAS and PVAS, have there any research that shows that this has had a positive impact on student learning, or had an impact on the professional staff? And the answer was no. The only thing that they've been able to show is that in Tennessee, they've shown an improvement on student performance on the NAEP. However, they feel that as more research is available, when more research and data is available, that they will start to see a positive result. If there is a positive result, I think it's because of a Hawthorne effect, because you're paying more attention to some of the things that are happening to try to increase the scores. Yes?
So the SLOs that elementary wrote in September,
Yes.
you're not using?
No, you can use them. No, any work that's been done can move forward. There's nobody saying we need to do new ones. This is just trying to make sure we get everybody to the finish line. Yep. No, any work that's been done. We have people here who have been working on them, who are really good, have a place. We have people who have yet to even think about it. But we need to get everybody to that same place by the end of the school year. So no, any work's been done, you may continue to use and work on. It's all been designed around those pieces. Some people have thrown them out and started again, but they're all, the work is doable. Okay, now let's talk about something really fun. This is the part that I think is going to frustrate some of you. And some of you may know everything about this. For some of you, it might be the first time you're seeing this. And this is PVAAS rostering process and PVAAS reports. If you're involved with this, if this impacts you, hopefully you've already met with your principal and you've started this process. Because this does not impact everybody in the room. This only impacts those of you that are teaching a tested content area. So who are they? Why third grade is teaching a tested content area. Well, thank you for volunteering. But teaching a tested content area, third grade doesn't count because there's no previous test. Fourth grade, math, science, reading, writing. Fifth grade, math, science, reading, writing. Sixth grade, I'm not sure where the writing assessment is in the science, but basically sixth grade if you're teaching math, science, writing, reading. If you are in seventh grade, the same. Eighth grade, the same. And at the high school, biology, literature, and algebra. If you are in the middle school teaching math, it's a double whammy. Middle school, seventh grade teachers who are teaching mathematics and algebra get evaluated on the performance of the students in both areas. Eighth grade, those that are teaching algebra and math, PSSA evaluation component, and a Keystone Algebra 1 component. They probably have the largest at stake in terms of accountability, mainly because the eighth grade algebra test has only about a 30% alignment with algebra. The eighth grade PSSA math exam only has about a 30% alignment with algebra, which is primarily what we're teaching in eighth grade. So that's a real challenge that we have to work through. So what we're talking about is that teacher-specific data, 15% of your evaluation, but not for 3 years. So what is happening is this year, the performance of your students will be banked. And it will be added to your students over the next 3 years in a rolling average. And then it will go on your evaluation. That is a continuous rolling average. So just so you are aware that if you happen to be teaching algebra this year, algebra the following year, and then teaching geometry, all of the other data then is released, and things don't start over again until you start teaching algebra. If you happen to be a fourth grade teacher and you're teaching in fourth grade, then you go back to third grade. Once again, you don't have a 3-year rolling average. This only is used in your evaluation when you have 3 consecutive years of a rolling average. But please note that then that continues. It's not like Act 48 where there's 3 years and a cutoff. It's a constant rolling average for the next 3 years and the next 3 years and the next 3 years. So you can see how it cycles through and will continue to cycle through moving forward. So what have we been doing with this? And this has been a significant amount of work on the district. And I'm telling you, hundreds and hundreds of hours of effort. First is through the Pennsylvania Information Management System, where we submit up to PDE the highly qualified teacher report, which basically is our entire schedule, all of the student information, all of your certifications, all of this information about you as a teacher goes up into the database. We then had to go into that database and we had to identify every single course that is tied directly to a tested content area. So at the elementary level, 5th grade math, 4th grade math, 3rd grade math, even though there'll be no report, still marked off. Reading, etc. At the middle school, every one of those courses, special education classrooms, every one of those courses, high school biology, and is it the 11th grade literature course? 10th grade literature and 10th grade biology? Those are the courses that are directly linked. So we had to go in there and link all of those. Those have been done. That's been submitted. The next piece is we've been working on the PVAAS teacher-specific reporting component. And that's where we have to identify the teacher connected to a course, connected to a student, which is what this looks like. And this is where this is what the next step in the process is. This is not going to happen until later in the year, but we want to prepare you for this. It is my hope, the plan was that you right now in the past, during January, maybe early February, sat down with your administrators and you talked about your students and you decided how much of that instruction of that child do I own. For those of you that are not familiar with it, let's say that Mr. Sullivan and I were both teaching a math course together and we had 22 students in the class. We would sit down and make a decision, or we made a decision, what part of that instruction for those students do I own? Now maybe we agreed that it was a 50-50 split on those students. Or maybe the way the class was set up, he was primarily delivering the instruction and I was there to support 4 students only. And so maybe we had a different percentage arrangement for that particular group. The challenges have looked different for some of our special education teachers. We made our best estimates in this process in what that should look like. The next thing that should happen, well, this is what we were trying to actually do. What I just talked about is we were trying to make sure that within the database, and this is what's important, so you have the discussion, but sometimes errors can happen between that discussion and the data that gets put in and the data that comes back. And we need to make sure that we're in agreement of that it's the right teachers, the right subject, and the right percent of teacher responsibility for that particular student. Because it's going to come back. And the next thing that's going to happen is that, and again, this is what, as it looks like, all teachers with full or partial responsibilities, anyone who participated with their building principals should have established this. About 33% of our faculty are tied to this. And again, grade 3, it's an exception. But this is what's going to happen this spring if you were one of those teachers. You're going to get a report that you're going to need to go online and verify this information. And it's so important that we communicate at that time, because maybe during that time, all of a sudden it realized that, you know what, the class that Jim and I were co-teaching together, you know what, there were some 3 or 4 other students added to my list. So instead of having a lot of responsibility for 4, now I had 7. So now we have to go in there and track that and understand what does that look like. And if I go in there and make that change, I want to make sure Jim knows I made that change. I don't want, or that all of a sudden he opens up and says, yo, Curtis, what are you doing to me? You know, all of a sudden I said I have 0 and he has 100%. Because what PDE has said, all those issues are to be resolved at the district level and the building level. So when we want you to communicate, we want you to make sure you're telling your principals when you're making those changes. We're going to work out a process for that. And if there are disagreements, I'm going to put it on the responsibility of the building principal to resolve it. This is what I believe it to be based on the instruction. For you as a teacher, this is going to happen the week of May 15th to the 16th, is when you're going to do your teacher rostering process. One of the things that we're doing right now, so you're aware of this, and maybe you've gotten the email, is we're resetting all of your PVAAS accounts. The reason we're doing this is previously we gave out PVAAS accounts to a lot of teachers in the district. Our coaches could go in there and see a lot of information. Because there's going to be specific reports about you, we're pulling that back. So the only people that are going to have access to your information will be you and your building principal. So we're working through that process right now, and you'll see why in the next couple of slides. Moving forward, we're asked you should not share your PVAAS passwords, or any passwords for that. There will be training that you're going to need to participate in. It's provided by PDE. It's an online module. You can take it anytime it fits into your schedule. I'm going to encourage you to take the training so you know exactly what you're doing, because at the end of the day, when you finish the rostering process, it's a legal document when you click off and say, I agree this to be true. And you're going to click it. There's going to be another statement that comes up from on the website from PDE saying, once again, I agree that this information is correct and true to my best of my knowledge. The learning is self-guided. It will walk you right through the process. It'll be available in February. We're going to suggest that you wait until April to really get into it, or end of March or April, so it's closer to this time that you need to do the rostering. But this is the other piece that I want you to know what is going to happen after you've completed that rostering. So you're going to complete the rostering. Then all of our students who have taken the test this year, all of that information over the summer goes up to the EVAS people that have the contract. And then for the first time ever, I talked about this about 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, in the fall this year, you will receive a TPP, a Teacher Performance Profile. Just like the school has a school performance profile with a rating number on it. And I'm going to show you what these reports are going to look like. Now, be aware that doesn't count towards your evaluation next year. It's a rolling average. So, but next year there's going to be the report. We've already talked about this. And I want you to know this is an interesting piece. According to PDE, under Right to Know Act, before I show the reports, under the Right to Know Act, your evaluation is not subject to right to know. So someone off the street cannot come in here and say, I want Curtis Griffin's evaluation. Actually, that's not true. Beginning next year, the superintendent's evaluation gets posted on the website. All right, let's change that. They cannot come in and ask for Mr. Sullivan's evaluation. His evaluation is a private matter. However, I don't know yet if someone could come in and ask for your teacher performance profile, because that's not your evaluation. But I have argued that because it is part of the observation process, someone could not come in and say, I want to see Mr. Kircher's observation of Mr. Williams, and I would argue, no, that's part of the evaluation process. That's not open to the public. I would argue that this is the same, that it's not open to the public. But that answer hasn't been completely resolved yet. I've already talked about this. Who's going to see your data? We are pulling everything back, so it's just the principal and you, superintendent, assistant superintendents, only the appropriate administrators tied to your performance. There will be, when you receive the reports, the first year there'll be a single year report. The following year there'll be a multi-year report. And then there will be a couple of various diagnostic reports for you. We already talked about that. This is what the report's going to look like. Just like what you see for the school performance profile. So when this comes out next year, in October, November, what you're going to see are the different color combinations, and it's going to tell you your students on the PSSA assessments or the Keystones, or if you're at the middle school, the PSSAs and the Keystones, did your students have 1 year's worth of growth? Now, this is a 5th grade example because you have a student up there for math, reading, and writing. Not a student, but that teacher for math, reading, and writing. If you're teaching algebra, it's just going to be all your students algebra. It's not going to be by your course. It's going to be all of them algebra. It will break out by course. You can break that out, but your summary is going to be all of your students. One of the things that I believe is going to be important for you to understand next year, not this year, is this whole idea of standard error. Because what will happen is Jim and I could have been teaching the same course to different students, have the same achievement levels, but based on the standard of error, on the calculation, he could be in the blue and I could be in the green. I could be in the green, he could be in the yellow, based on standard error. Because if you looked at your school performance profiles, you will see that there were some schools that had some very similar scores, but they were just off a little bit in terms of where the cut mark was on the yellow, green, blue, and in the scoring. And a lot of that's controlled by what's known as the standard of error. We'll talk about that next year. I only point that out to you because you may see something and then come running down and say, wait a second, why is it that our kids did the same? And as we're sitting there talking with one another, it looks drastically different. So that report's going to come out. Once again, the only people that are going to see that report are going to be you, your building principal. No other teacher in the school will be able to access that because we're changing the PVAAS pieces. There'll be a diagnostic summary which allows you to go in there, and in the diagnostic summary, this doesn't look at the individual students, this looks at the performance of all the students. It doesn't matter if it's been weighted or not. Very different. And I point that out because one will show one score, and once again, this goes back to Jim and I sharing a class. So the first one, that score could be, Jim and I could be teaching the same class, the same group of students, but I have one level of accountability for X amount of students in that class. He has a different level of accountability for X amount of students in that class. My students did not grow as much as Jim's students did, and so he had a stronger performance on that summary. However, when we look at the diagnostic summary report next year, it doesn't matter. It's just going to show that whole group of kids. And so there, you may see some variance at that time. We're going to talk a lot more about this next year. I'm just trying to stress the importance. I'm going through this now to stress the importance of paying attention to the PVAAS rostering process. That's why I'm pushing this information today. Then, you saw that 5th grade teacher? She was teaching 3 different subject areas. She got a value-added report on the performance of each of those. All of that is then put together, and it is this score, when everything is added together, that gets rolled over for into the next year, and the next year that becomes part of your evaluation. So it's taking it from here, moving it down to 1 score. You take this year, then you pull it with next year's population. It's not an average of the two. They actually pull the populations together, and they pull the populations together, and that ends up with your performance score in 3 years. And then they're going to submit to you, PD is going to give you this opportunity to fill out this form and tell them or tell us what you've learned from that process. Any questions about PVAAS before I talk about district initiatives?
I mean, this is not directed at you, but like, where's all the money coming from? If Pennsylvania can't afford pensions, this to do all this and pay these companies and...
that was my comment at the board meeting last night. It would be very fascinating if somebody actually did a research study to identify the actual cost per student from I know, but I'm saying, that's the point I was making. I don't know how much it costs. I know how much, what I would like to know is what is the cost when you factor in my time, your time, testing time, cost of the test, cost to produce the test, cost to ship the test, all of that other effort that goes involved. But it's very expensive.
Do you think at any point school districts will band together and start demanding that information when you start losing good teachers to?
No.
No?
No. I think what will happen is maybe the state legislature may make changes in the next 5 or 6 years, but because that's the one question people ask. If the governor changes, will this change? This was enacted by the legislator, not by the governor. It's part of his agenda, but it was a legislative issue that voted this in. So it's the law. PDE just implements it based on the legislation. It's an incredible amount of money. But I don't know the total cost. Does everybody have a sense that PVAAS rostering is important? All right, let's talk about something more enjoyable. Let me tell you about the facilities project. First and foremost, I don't know if you know this, but we're closing Lime Kiln Simmons Elementary School. We've not used it in maybe 6 years, but we're finally going through the process of officially closing Lime Kiln Simmons, the building. We've been out of it for a couple of years. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that land, with that building. There's all kinds of options out there, from holding it to selling it, to potentially in the future building another school on it. So that's yet to be determined. We're in the middle of doing a phenomenal amount of demographic studies. We're trying to understand what are our future needs on population for this particular district. We look at the base. We know there's the potential of 500 to 800 students when the base is completely built out. We don't know when that will be, but I will tell you what's been interesting about the demographic studies are some things that I've learned, and that is how much the face of this district is changed in the last 10 years. To give you some statistics that I was shocked about, we are now approximately 80% white, and 20% is either Hispanic, African American, and or Asian. Interesting, we have some schools this year that are only 70% white and are 30% Asian, African American, or Hispanic. That's a big shift for this school district, and it is happening all over Pennsylvania, these shifting demographics. We now actually have 2 schools that have more than 30% of their students on free and reduced lunch. That's a huge shift for the Hatboro-Horsham School District. Our population is declining. Our special education population has stayed the same in terms of numbers, but the services required of these students have greatly increased. You probably feel that more than anybody, and you probably could have told me that without even looking at the numbers. So those are some changes that we're trying to understand. Another really interesting one is I was looking at our performance on PSSAs over time, and I found it really interesting when you look at our performance by grade level over the last 8 years, we're fairly constant. There's some minor fluctuation, but you look at 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade over time, there's always a dip in 5th and 6th grade, and there's always a huge uptake at 8th grade in our district. So then I went in and I looked at our cohort, and I looked at kids that have been in our district since they've been in 3rd grade. How did they perform? And it's amazing. They either stayed the same or improved through our district. But I looked at the number. So I looked at the 3rd grade number when they were, the number of students who stayed in the district from 3rd grade to 8th grade on this one group were 317 or 311 students. One was 317, the other was 311. But yet 430 students took the test. And all of a sudden, as you start to look at it, you start to find out, and some of you probably felt this, we're having an increasing transient population. That is, each year there are more and more students who are moving in, moving out in the process. Some are moving in, moving out, taking the same seats. But then there are others that are moving in and staying. But I think we need to go back in and we start to look at our academic performance and start to look at and ask ourselves, do we need to make adjustments to our instructional strategies based on the needs of the various populations that are moving in the district. And how is that impacting? So we're looking very closely at our transient population. This past year, we had students move into this district from 70 different countries. I was shocked at that. I was shocked. And so we're looking at that. When I look at the countries, we've had people move in. A lot of people came in this year from the Middle East. And it might be because of what's happened, some of the things that were happening in the Middle East. But the population we've come in from the Middle East, we have people coming in from Russia, India, it's all over the board. It's all over the board that are coming into this area. And that's new for the Hatboro-Horsham area. I mean, we've always had a population, but drastically increasing. So that's happening with the demographic. Feasibility study, we're going to finish this up because we know the next 20 years we're going to need to work on all of our schools, whether it's the high school or whether it's Simmons, or whether it's Keith Valley Middle School or Pennypack. There's work that needs to be done on all of our schools, and we need to begin working on that. For the middle school, the plan is simple. Our goal, when the base starts to develop, which I believe will really be developing in 5 to 6 years from now, our goal is to build a brand new middle school. The middle school will be on 40 acres of land that we have secured through the BRAC process that will be given to the district for basically a small fee or nothing. So that's what's going to happen to Keith Valley Middle School. During that time, we will keep putting in place those things that we need to do to maintain the building, because once we build a new school, then we'll have to determine if we're going to use this for something else, sell it, or just sell the land and use that value of the land to invest in our facilities. So that's the plan for the middle school. Hollowell, and you can't quite see it on that, but we are building a brand new Hollowell. Matter of fact, Hollowell teachers today are out visiting. Today we're on a visit to elementary schools. We've hired the architect, which is EI Architects. We are in the final stages of hiring a construction manager. We're beginning the design phase. And before the end of the year, before the beginning of next school year, I hope to hold the Act 34 hearing and hope to begin construction. Our goal is to open a new Hollowell Elementary School in the fall of 2016. So that project is going to move very fast. The reason we can do this is because we don't need to build it where Hollowell is. We have that Army Reserve land is where the new Hollowell Elementary School will be built, build it there, and then tear down that Hollowell. Once we finish that building, we'll be working on building probably another new elementary school. Whether it's a tear down or not, we have a couple different options out there. One of the options is to, once Hollowell is built, is to relocate people to a school and then tear down the other school, build it up, relocate again. It's the same process I believe that Abington used as they were redoing all of their elementary schools. So our goal is to start to work on that project. For some of the other district initiatives, I'm really excited about some of the things that we've been doing around teaching and learning this year. I know that everybody's working really hard on preparation for the Keystone exams and the PSSAs, even in spite of all the weather challenges. I know people are working very hard. We continue with the safety and security enhancements. The technology study is almost completed. And one of the things that on a personal level that I've been most impressed with this year is the work that you folks are doing with formative assessment. I've had an opportunity to stop in on some of those training sessions, and the work, the training, the learning, I think is phenomenal and will have a very positive impact on learning. I think that will have a far more impact on learning and teaching and student performance than ever the PVAAS stuff will. I think that's where we should be investing our money in those types of training. So if you're not involved in the formative assessment project, I encourage you to get involved in the future. Talk to some of the folks that have been involved in the training, because as I've talked to those teachers, they felt that the training has been extremely valuable to them. We're still playing with the hybrid learning. We'll continue to grow that model. Some of it has gone very well. Some of it's had some really rough edges, but I believe moving forward that the hybrid learning model is going to be a component of learning moving forward. Our SAP program changes have been in place, an area we have to continue to work to help our students. Our high school folks, I hate to lay this on you, but we're going to have a lot of work to do over the next couple of weeks tied to Chapter 4. We've been waiting for it. We've been waiting for it. This past Saturday, the Chapter 4 revisions have been published in the state register, which means that we have to implement some of these things within 90 days. Graduation requirements have changed. No longer is the graduation project required for graduation. Also, they've changed now that, believe it or not, you have to pass the Keystones to graduate. So now these things don't go into effect next year, but we have to start working on what our plan will be, because I believe it's 2017 that they go into effect, our current 9th graders, or our current 9th graders coming in, I'm not sure. So we have work to do. On top of all this other stuff, we have work to do, and as I said before, I'll ask you to engage with us in that process, because it really does impact you along the way. So that's going to be, for the rest of the district, the Chapter 4 changes are minor, other than the adoption of the Pennsylvania core standards. We're working on comprehensive literature review, district RTII, PLCs. We're working on the budget right now. We're in better shape this year in the budget than we've been in the past 3 years. We have about a $500,000 difference. I feel very confident by June 30th we'll be able to resolve that. And then we're working on the professional development plan for next year. Some policy reviews are continuing. And then if you haven't read that email I sent out a couple weeks ago, please do on child abuse reporting, because that's the law and that's something that you're required to do. Not because I'm telling you to do it, because the state legislature is requiring you to do that. And you have some responsibilities in reporting child abuse that if you do not do so, could find yourself losing your certification and or being punishable by a crime. So please read that information and be aware of it. Those are all the things that I wanted to share with you today. I'm about 5 minutes behind on my schedule. Too many questions, but I appreciate it. What questions do you have? Other questions on any of these things that we've talked about today? So walking out, here's the things that I would hope that you would take with you if I had an exit ticket at the end of the door. I would hope that you have an understanding of the flex days and recognizing that we were trying to give you the opportunity to get 2 days in. Hopefully you will. Some of you might not. That's okay. We'll find another solution along the way. Hopefully you have a sense that, you know, with the SLOs, you have a responsibility that we need to get done, and we're building it this year so we're in a good place next year. It's not about trying to give you extra work. We just want to be in a good place for next year along the way. That if you are involved in PVAAS, the rostering is important, and that we need to work through that in the spring, or later in the spring, and that we're going to build a new Hollowell that will be open in 2016. So those are the takeaways that I hope you remember, and if you remember anything else, I probably could have limited this thing to a 5-minute presentation, say, know this, know this, know this, know this, but then what fun would it have been?